Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
General Hospital spoilers reveal that numerous observers have decided their team Tracy Quartermaine all the way. On social media, GH suckers have been replying to the Snake Quartermaine sighting with Veronica Ronnie Bard, so a plenty of them are venting support for Tracy following all the will fiddle drama. It's true that guilt-ridden Ronnie came to her senses and ripped up the paperwork rather of going through with the house trade to Drew Kane. Ronnie eventually did the right thing, but that doesn't negate the wrongdoing that came before it. It was Martin Gray's idea to rope Ronnie into all this, but it was her choice to go on with it. Let's not pretend Ronnie is some naive teenager who didn't know what she was doing. We also see Aunt forget how Ronnie indicted Tracy of remedying her and threw her out of the Quartermaine manse. Ronnie knew that wasn't her house, but she still forced Tracy to leave and made wrong allegations against Tracy in the process. Now that Ronnie's part in Martin's fiddle has been exposed, everyone is being bizarrely chill about it. Why is Tracy the only one worried about Monica Quartermaine's wishes being sabotaged while Ronnie pretended she was sweet and innocent? It's strange for the Quartermaine clan to be so adamant that Ronnie is part of the family now. Tracy has every right to throw Ronnie out incontinently after what she did, especially since Monica named her the manse's proprietor. While Ronnie and Martin were in cahoots, Tracy faced counter-reaction for standing against Monica's family. You'd suppose that would change after everyone got updates on the real news, but Tracy's family is ever still making her out to be the villain. It was sad watching Michael Corinthos, Brooke Lynn Quartermaine, Harrison Chase, Olivia Quartermaine and Ned Quartermaine follow Ronnie out the door as they all took her side. Tracy deserves family fidelity far further than Ronnie does in this situation considering everything that's happened. Ronnie should count herself lucky that she's not facing charges and accept that Tracy's right to want relief of her ASAP. General Hospital spoilers indicate Tracy will patch effects up with the serpents who walked out on her soon, but we'd say they're the bones. Who need to be apologizing? The opulent ballroom of the Metro Court Hotel glittered, a carefully constructed universe of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers scattered light like diamond dust across the sea of black tie and designer gowns. The air hummed with the low, self-satisfied murmur of Port Charles's elite, a symphony of clinking champagne flutes and discreetly negotiated power plays. At the center of this universe, holding court with the regal authority of a queen, was Tracy Quartermaine. Tonight was a triumph. The Edward Quartermaine Memorial Gala, an event she had single-handedly wrestled from the jaws of chaos into a stunning success. It was more than a fundraiser, it was a reassertion of the Quartermaine name, a beacon of old money and enduring legacy in a city increasingly overrun with new wealth and criminal enterprises. Tracy, in a gown of sapphire velvet that matched her sharp, discerning eyes, surveyed her domain. A thin, satisfied smile played on her lips. Everything was in its place. Well, almost everything. Her son, Ned, now going by his ridiculous rock star persona Eddie Main for reasons that still made her roll her eyes, was by her side. He was her pride and her perpetual frustration, the heir to a legacy he sometimes seemed determined to mock with a guitar solo. "Mother, you've outdone yourself," Ned said, leaning in, his voice warm with genuine admiration. The old man would be grumbling about the cost, but secretly, he'd be thrilled. "Your grandfather understood the price of prominence, unlike some," Tracy replied, her gaze flicking pointedly towards her brother, Monica, who was deep in conversation with a group from General Hospital. The Quartermaine dynamics were a perpetual chess game, and Tracy was always several moves ahead. The evening's main event was about to begin. A local children's choir, beneficiaries of the gala's proceeds, had assembled on the small, flower-bedecked stage. They were there to sing a simple, heartfelt song of gratitude. It was a piece of strategic sentimentality Tracy had approved, a reminder that even titans of industry had soft, philanthropic hearts, especially when cameras were present. As the choir director, a woman named Veronica Ronnie Walters, stepped forward to introduce the piece, Tracy allowed her mind to wander to the logistics of the silent auction. Ronnie was a recent, albeit efficient, addition to the city's cultural scene. She was a woman in her late 60s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and a sharp intelligence in her eyes that Tracy, in another life, might have appreciated. She ran the local community arts center with an iron fist and had organized this performance with flawless precision. Ladies and gentlemen, Ronnie's voice was clear and steady, devoid of the sycophantic warmth Tracy usually heard from people addressing the Quartermain family. Thank you for your generosity. These children are the future, and your support ensures their future is filled with music. The children began to sing, their voices pure and sweet, cutting through the cynical air of the ballroom. It was a hymn, one about grace and redemption. Tracy, for a fleeting second, felt an unexpected pang in her chest. It was a feeling she usually kept locked away in the deepest vault of her heart, behind ledgers of business deals and a lifetime of carefully nurtured resentments. Encouraging words floated around her, a gentle current of approval. A lovely touch, Tracy, Lois, Ned's wife, whispered, squeezing her arm. Beautifully arranged, Brooke Lynn, her granddaughter, added, her phone finally put away for a moment. Even Monica offered a rare, approving nod. This was her baptism. Not of water and spirit, but of social reaffirmation. This event, this night, was her immersion into the waters of public respectability and familial approval. She was being anointed, not as a saint, but as the undisputed matriarch, the one who could still wield the Quartermain name like a scepter and produce magic. She stood a little straighter, the encouraging words fortifying her, making the decades of struggle feel, for a moment, worthwhile. She had earned this. This was her new beginning, her proof that she was more than just old Edward's difficult daughter, she was the keeper of the flame. The song concluded to a wave of sincere applause. The children beamed, bowing awkwardly. Ronnie shepherded them off the stage with a quiet efficiency that again, Tracy noted with a professional's eye, was commendable. It was as the crowd began to disperse back into their conversational clusters that Tracy's world, so perfectly ordered, began to crack. She saw Laura Collins, the mayor and a repository of the city's oldest secrets, approach Ronnie. They spoke briefly. Then, Laura gestured towards Tracy, and Ronnie's gaze followed. What happened next was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to Tracy, who had built her life on reading the micro-expressions of friends and foes alike. It was a seismic event. Ronnie's face, usually a mask of composed competence, paled. A flicker of something, recognition, panic, a deep, old pain, passed through her eyes. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a strained smile as Laura led her across the room. Tracy, Laura said, her voice a model of diplomatic grace, I don't believe you've had the pleasure of meeting Veronica Walters properly. Ronnie, this is Tracy Quartermain, the brilliant force behind tonight's event. Tracy extended a hand, her smile polished and automatic. A beautiful performance, Ms. Walters. You have them very well trained. Ronnie took her hand. Her grip was firm, but her skin was cold. Thank you, Ms. Quartermain. It's a lovely event. And then Ronnie's eyes, a shade of hazel so familiar it was unsettling, dropped to Tracy's chest. Not in an inappropriate way, but focused. She was staring at the pendant Tracy wore. It was an Art Deco piece, a platinum setting holding a single, flawless sapphire. It had been her mother's. A piece Tracy wore only on the most significant of occasions, a tangible link to the ghost of Lila Quartermain. Ronnie's breath hitched, a tiny, almost inaudible sound. That's a remarkable piece, she whispered, her voice losing its steadiness. Thank you, Tracy said, her instincts now on high alert. It was my mother's. Ronnie's eyes snapped up to meet Tracy's. The look in them was no longer one of polite admiration or even vague panic. It was a look of profound, earth-shattering shock, mixed with a dawning, terrifying realization. The color drained from her face completely. Your mother? Ronnie's voice was a thread of sound. Yes. Lila Quartermain, Tracy said, her tone growing cooler, a defensive mechanism kicking in. Why was this woman so affected by a piece of jewelry? Ronnie shook her head, a slow, disbelieving motion. She released Tracy's hand as if it had burned her. No. No, that's not possible. Laura, sensing the sudden, dangerous shift in atmosphere, tried to intercede. Ronnie, are you feeling all right? You look faint. But Ronnie wasn't listening. Her eyes were locked on Tracy, drilling into her, seeing past the velvet gown and the perfectly coiffed hair and the mantle of Quartermain authority. The locket, Ronnie breathed. It opens, doesn't it? There's a photograph inside. A cold dread, colder than any ice in the champagne buckets, began to trickle down Tracy's spine. How could she know that? The clasp was nearly invisible, a secret known only to the family. Inside was a tiny, faded picture of Lila as a young woman, holding her firstborn, Alan. Who are you? Tracy's question was a blade, sharp and quiet. Tears welled in Ronnie's eyes, but they were not tears of joy. They were tears of a cataclysm. My name, the name I was given, was Veronica. But my family, the family that took me in, they called me Ronnie. She swallowed, a painful-looking effort. Before that, before the system, my mother, she had a locket just like that. She told me there was a picture of her and my brother inside. She said she had to give one of her babies away, to keep her safe. She said she kept the other, the sister who got to stay. The ballroom, with all its noise and light, seemed to recede into a distant tunnel. The encouraging words from moments before were now a meaningless echo. Tracy's heart was pounding a violent, frantic rhythm against her ribs. She could feel the eyes of her family, of the entire room, on them. This couldn't be happening. This was some cruel, bizarre joke. What are you talking about? Tracy's voice was low, venomous. My mother had 2 children. Alan and me. Ronnie shook her head, a single tear tracing a path through her powder. She had 3. The word hung in the air between them, a bomb that had already detonated, the sound of the blast just now reaching Tracy's ears. 3. Fragments of a half-remembered past, stories never fully told, slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. Lila's occasional, uncharacteristic sadness. A whispered argument between her parents, hushed when she entered the room. A story about a long trip her mother took when Tracy was very young, a story that never quite added up. You're lying, Tracy hissed, the words an automatic, desperate defense. Her entire identity was built on being a Quartermain, on the specific, brutal dynamics of her immediate family. There was no room for a third. There was no room for this stranger. Am I? Ronnie's voice gained a sliver of steel. Look at me, Tracy. Really look at me. And Tracy did. She looked past the different hairstyle, the different clothes, the different life etched into Ronnie's face. She saw the same stubborn set of the jaw. The same arch of the eyebrow. The same hazel eyes that Lila Rutherford had passed down to her daughter. Her eyes. It was like looking into a distorted mirror, a reflection of the life she might have lived, the person she might have been without the Quartermain name and fortune. The resemblance was suddenly, blindingly obvious. It had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. The angry threats began to bubble up from the depths of Tracy's soul, born of a lifetime of insecurity and the primal need to protect her territory. This is an outrage, she whispered, her voice trembling with a fury she could barely contain. A calculated, pathetic attempt to get at the Quartermain money. Do you have any idea who you are dealing with? I will have you investigated. I will have you ruined. I will destroy you and whatever grift you're trying to pull. The words were meant to be a weapon, to send this woman scurrying back into the shadows. But Ronnie didn't flinch. The shock on her face was now mingled with a deep, resonant anger of her own. You think I want this? Ronnie shot back, her voice low but fierce, a counter-thrust to Tracy's attack. You think I wanted to walk in here tonight and have my entire life, my entire sense of self, unravel because of a piece of jewelry? I had a life, Tracy. A good life. I had parents who loved me, a career I built with my own 2 hands. I didn't need the great and powerful Quartermains. I certainly don't need your venom or your threats. She took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. My mother, our mother, gave me away. She gave me a locket and then she handed me to strangers. I grew up wondering what was so wrong with me that she kept you and not me. And now I find you. My sister. And you're, this. She gestured at Tracy, at the ballroom, at the life of privilege, her expression one of utter contempt. All this money, all this power, and you're still just a scared, bitter woman threatening to destroy the only person who might understand what it was like to be Lila Quartermain's daughter. The accusation landed with the precision of a scalpel, cutting directly to the core of Tracy's deepest insecurities. The carefully constructed facade of the unflappable matriarch crumbled. She felt exposed, naked, the foundation of her life turning to quicksand beneath her feet. Get out, Tracy rasped, the words stripped of all their former power, sounding brittle and broken. Get out of my sight. Ronnie held her gaze for a moment longer, a universe of pain and history passing between them. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving Tracy standing alone in the middle of her triumphant gala. The baptism was over. The waters of affirmation had been poisoned. The encouraging words were ashes in her mouth. Ned was at her side in an instant. Mother? What in God's name was that about? What did she say to you? Tracy couldn't answer. She could only stare at the space where Ronnie had been, the woman's final words echoing in her mind. A scared, bitter woman. The rest of the evening was a blur. She moved through the motions, a ghost at her own feast, her smile a rictus of pain. She offered hollow goodbyes and accepted hollow compliments. The moment the last guest was gone, she fled to the silence of the Quartermain mansion, to the one room that still felt like hers, her study. She stood before the grand portrait of Lila that hung over the fireplace. Her mother's gentle, knowing smile now seemed like a lie. A secret kept for a lifetime. She reached up and unclasped the sapphire pendant, fumbling with the hidden catch. It sprang open. There was the tiny photograph of a beautiful young Lila holding a baby Alan. Tracy had seen it 1,000 times. But now, for the first time, she noticed the way Lila's other hand was positioned, curled slightly, as if it should have been resting on something, or someone. Holding another child. The sister who was sent away. A sob, raw and unforgiving, tore from Tracy's throat. It wasn't just grief for a lost sister. It was grief for the mother she thought she knew. It was the shattering of the foundational myth of her own life. All her fights with Alan, her rivalry with Monica, her desperate need to prove herself worthy of the Quartermain name, it had all happened in the long, dark shadow of a missing sister. A secret that Lila had taken to her grave. The angry threats she had hurled at Ronnie now filled her with shame. They were the cries of a wounded animal, lashing out at the source of its pain. But beneath the shock and the grief, the Quartermain steel began to reassert itself. The questions began to form. Why? Why did Lila do it? What was the scandal, the secret, that forced her to give away her own child? And who else knew? The discovery was not an end, but a brutal, painful beginning. The baptism of fire was over. Now, the war for the truth was about to begin. Tracy Quartermain had spent her life fighting for her place in this family. Now, she would have to fight to understand the family itself, and in doing so, finally come to understand the fractured, complicated woman staring back at her from her mother's portrait. The sister was found. And nothing would ever be the same again.